Oh, we still need more time so we can wake up here on this Tuesday to get things going. And we have a new person in studio. It's Derek Bodner. He's back. Welcome to the PHLY
Everything old is new again.
Sixers podcast along with Derek Bodner, Kyle Neubeck. I'm Devon Givens. We appreciate Zach hanging out with us yesterday. Zach Berman from the PHLY Eagles podcast. Brianna is here. You are here with us. And you're also here with us on Twitter. It looks like that you have us hanging out there. So we appreciate everybody on YouTube and on Twitter. Hang out with us, talking some hoops, talking some junk, yelling at each other, sharing some secrets. It's the summertime, baby. Let's have some fun. And yet another Paul George rumor has surfaced here for Paul George's name being linked up with the Philadelphia 76ers, of course. But what does it really mean in terms of the 76ers and Paul George and a potential marriage? We'll get to that. We'll talk about DeAnthony Melton. Some stuff out there, too, from a local reporter, our buddy Keith Pompey from the Philadelphia Inquirer at Inquirer.com, having some stuff out there about his potential free agency and what that may look like. We'll talk about the conference finals a little bit later, some other awards, things that have popped up here today. We got you all covered on this Tuesday. Kyle, starting with you, man. Smoke all over the place. Well, we don't have any alarms going off in here, so we're good.
No smoke coming out of my ears like yesterday.
Not like yesterday against the Denver people, but smoke nonetheless coming from, once again, Los Angeles, where Shams puts out some more stuff about Paul George. And what does this mean?
Well, first of all, Lost Sleep TV said they need another Kyle epic rant.
We got to find
I don't have
something.
another one in me today. You have to. There's only so many people and so many fan bases that made collaborative efforts to try to fire you, you know? So don't have that kind of smoke for everybody.
Even you saw how New York was let off the hook at the end a little bit there. So you can see it's really focused towards the Denver people.
Anyway, a lot of smoke. Shams' report, I'd say, so the basic outline of it is something we've talked a lot about on the show, which is a lot of people around the league suspect Paul George ends up back in LA. We've said that. I think that's how we're probably all leaning, even as we've talked about Paul over the last, month, few weeks, however long it's been that we've been really zeroing in on him. There's an important thing that needs to be noted, I wasn't watching their show this morning initially. I caught up Devon in our pre-production meeting, watched the clip. There's a very important thing that people skipped over. It's that, yes, I do think all things being equal, Paul George would like to stay in California. All things being equal, Paul George wants to get paid. Paul George wants a max contract. And what we've said on the show, what I've said on this show certainly a bunch of times, is that the gap between the Clippers and Paul George is very simple. The Clippers do not want to pay Paul George the max. Kawhi Leonard is supposed to be the top of their market. Kawhi's extension was signed with the idea in mind. He's numero uno in LA. He's going to make more than everyone else. He's going to be treated like that guy, even with the issues he has, staying healthy and whatnot, that he is the alpha, and everyone else comes in under that number. Well, Paul George, from what I have heard, from what other reporters have been told and have reported around the league, excuse me.
Yep.
Paul George is not riding on that. Paul George wants a max contract, and the Clippers at present are not stepping up to the plate and offering that money. And so it's new smoke, but it's not providing any new information on. We're not hearing, hey, Steve Ballmer has changed his mind. Steve Ballmer is going to pay him. We're not hearing that Lawrence Frank and the brain trust there are like, hey, we have to get this done. We are going to sign Paul George no matter what it costs. And we've talked some on this show about Paul's reputation amongst, I'd say the fans and the media and other people in LA, which is to say a lot of them don't even necessarily want him back.
Yeah.
They are not willing to go to that top number, that $49, $50 million a year that Paul is going to command on a max contract. And so I think every time news comes out or somebody says everyone expects Paul to go back to LA, I do believe that that's true, that a lot of people expect it. Unfortunately for the Clippers, they need to move off of their position, or Paul George needs to move off of his position And I think one of those is a lot more likely, which is to say you're paying him the max or he's signing with Orlando or Philadelphia or whoever is going to give him that money.
It is sort of a nightmare scenario for the Clippers that the Sixers have max cap space. What we have said from the time is if the Clippers step up and offer that contract, he will go back to LA. If not, we think the Sixers will offer him what needs to happen. And with the Sixers sitting there with cap space and a huge need, it's going to force them to step up. And I think I said this right from the jump. I expect Paul George eventually, I think the most likely outcome, I won't say I expect, the most likely outcome is that the Clippers eventually cave, offer him a contract, if not the max, close enough that he says, yes, this is good enough, I want to stay in LA. And the Sixers move on to, I don't want to call it plan B because we don't know their priority list for sure, but go on to the next option. So I think that has always been the most likely outcome of this. I think that's still the most likely outcome. Like you said, this might be new smoke, quote unquote, but it's more noise than it is actual new information. It's just a reiteration of what we all believed beforehand. So we'll see. It's going to be a long month and a half until this all gets sorted. There's going to be a lot of reports like that of, Paul George is likely to remain in LA, or Paul George wants to remain in LA, or Paul George, all things being equal, Paul George will remain in LA. We'll rephrase it 16 different times. I think the end result is what we've said the entire time. If they offer him a contract close to it, he'll stay. If not, then the Sixers have a chance.
They're playing hardball, Los Angeles, as we know, for them not to get it done during the season after taking care of Kawhi Leonard with his new deal. And part of that, of course, is you do have to pay James Harden if they're looking to keep him. And then the Paul George piece, which is more important for their overall structure of how they team built or around that group. They brought in James Harden to add to it. Can they adjust to it? Sure, they can. But they're also going to have to pay them both. But the Paul George thing, like we've all said here now, said in the past, that it's more likely that he would stay there in Los Angeles. There's too many things going on with him being a Los Angeles guy and so many other factors that we talked about pre-show that we'll bring up here again. But as far as him being there and what he wants to do there, right now, before we get to the other factors of it, which will play into it, this is where the part we look at it and say, are the Sixers, not the Sixers in per se, because Orlando is also a team that has been linked to Paul George a little bit with the cap space, the smoke going there. Are these teams being used? It's a natural thing in professional sports or any workforce. If somebody wants you and they're coming after you, you can use that as leverage to get what you want. And of course, if Paul George is going to get these offers from these other potential teams like the Sixers or the Magic and bring back to the Clippers, what are the alternatives for the Clippers that are going to be better than Paul George in a case where they have to now figure out how to replace him in that lineup? So for us here, and we look at it, are the Sixers being played a little bit as part of our thumbnail text that says they're being played just a bit in terms of raising that value of trying to get what he wants from the Clippers?
I guess the way I would push back on that is being played makes it seem like you don't understand what's going on.
All right, so
I think Daryl 100% understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Where the Clippers don't want to make that contract offer. The Sixers have the space. Because the Sixers have the space, the Clippers might have to make that contract offer. And if that happens, then Paul George is probably going back to LA. I think Daryl understands all of that. So I don't want to say that the Sixers are being played, but because the Sixers have that cap space, it might increase the chances that the Clippers make that offer.
Here's the other thing that I think is important to consider. Every time a new rumor comes up, we know close to with 100% certainty that the Clippers were reluctant in February, March, April to give Paul George the money that he wanted. After the playoff series that they had against the Dallas Mavericks, do you think it's more or less likely that they give him the max? Do you think they would have been swayed even further to give him more money after a series that ended that the blowback was essentially like, you can't count on this guy the way that you need to?
I don't think it probably changes it that much because I don't think they're counting on him to be a 1 or 2 option. I think they're like the Sixers. They want him to slot into that third option role, but because Kawhi missed so much time and was in and out of the lineup, he wasn't able to slot into his natural role. It's a little bit like the Sixers where you can plan for Kawhi Leonard to not be there, but it doesn't really matter because if the Kawhi Leonard's not there and not himself, then you're not contending anyway. Yeah. So I don't think they're looking at it like we can't commit to Paul because Kawhi was injured, and I think ultimately they would view their failure not necessarily, sure, is Paul overtaxed at being a 1 option at this point in his career? Absolutely. But I think the major failure to advance is Kawhi's health.
I just think if if they're sitting there in March and are hemming and hawing and saying, I don't know if we can give Paul George that money, like, and there's the hesitation, then there has been nothing since then except the existential threat of the Sixers or the Magic or whoever giving Paul George money that would move the Clippers off that position. There's been no force that would say we're now more willing to give you that money.
So I think what the Clippers are hoping for, if I were the Clippers, let's say this is what I would hope for, because I don't want to speak like I know what they're thinking. I think you would be sitting here saying, like, look, if push came to shove, maybe we give him a max, but hopefully maybe something happened with Jimmy at the time of the draft that could settle with the Sixers. The Sixers are off the board. Now we have more leverage. We can get him to come back at less than that. I think you wouldn't give it to him now because there's still that possibility that all might unfold, and because if that unfolds, you don't have to give him as much money. So maybe that's what's going on.
Yeah, I just, look, Paul George, as we've said on this show, he's available because he has not lived up to what they want him to be there, right? And because
where they felt like they should have been in the finals at some point by now.
Yeah,
yes.
and frankly, like, they needed him to be better than he was against Dallas. And not all of that is, I mean, everyone always will focus on the offensive side of the ball. And I know I've said on this show.
Oh, no, he's a mediocre, maybe average defender at this stage of his career.
Yeah. And some of that is just the want to, right? Like, I think, and there are some Clippers writers, media, podcasters, whatnot, who talked about this at the end of the season. In that Dallas series, Paul George was not only not taking the top assignment, but was taking assignments where he's just standing in the corner half the time, right? Like, and I understand that he had a higher offensive burden with Kawhi out and out of the lineup. You need him to flex his muscles on offense, which frankly, other than one game, he really didn't do.
Yeah.
But he's also not doing much on defense. So it's like, okay, if you're Ty Lue, if you're Lawrence Frank, if you're Steve Ballmer, the guys who are overseeing the team, and you're like, okay, well, on the one hand, he is not good enough as the top option to carry us offensively. Or let's just say as one of the top two options. Because Harden, I think, actually played better. He played better than probably you would have expected coming into the year or even coming into the playoff run. But you're also not giving us enough on defense. Like, why are the Clippers coming to Paul George's door? Like, here you go, buddy. Here's all the money that you want. Like, I just don't see the urgency from. I understand the urgency in the sense that
the urgency
they don't
have
have
no
other
options. Yes.
They are painted into a corner, and maybe that's enough. Maybe Steve Ballmer, knowing that he's going to open this new arena, you want to have as many stars as possible. Even when you're very good, you're still in the shadow of the Lakers in LA. I get all those factors, but if you have Harden on a reasonable deal, if Kawhi is healthy, and then you have the role players in between who fit fairly nicely next to those guys, it really just comes down to me. Steve Ballmer is going to have to wake up one day and say, fuck it. I don't care. Just pay him whatever he wants.
Yep.
I feel like if he really wanted to do that, that would already happen. So I think this is going to come right down to the wire. I think Derek made a good point about, maybe the Jimmy Butler thing blows up in Miami and the Sixers see we can secure him for sure and not worry about we got to bid with Orlando, bid with the Clippers, and try to lure this guy away from his hometown. And I know Jimmy really likes Miami and the setup there, and certainly is nice to live on or near South Beach, right? Nice winters compared to the East Coast and a lot of other places around the States. But I don't know, man. I think this is just, we're going to keep spinning around in circles for the next, can't even say month and a half. It's a month and some change at this point. Mm-hmm. It's crazy how close we are to having some finality to all this.
I know, it's May 21st. So the draft is the 20, I think it's the following week. So it's like
Thursday,
the 27th.
Yeah, Thursday of that week.
It's Wednesday and Thursday this year. Remember?
Right.
They split it up. We get to do two draft shows.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So yeah, but part of it too, and we even incorporate the whole conversation about Paul George of why he wants to stay. Obviously, it's the LA-based thing from being at home, but we discussed the media side of things because he has his podcast. We discussed the fact that uprooting his family once again to move back cross country, where the furthest he went before was Indiana. He's never been all the way east to this side of things. And he's had many of opportunities to maybe move and force his way to different spots. He didn't. So why, yes, there may be some real interest there, but how much of it does he really want to do? Even, and would that also be coming to what the Clippers are thinking of? All right, yeah, you might get that $200 million, but are you really going to get that from them once they know you're not coming here? And are you willing to take just a little bit less to stay back here because of those other things that you could still benefit from? And that's the piece. That's another piece to add into the conversation of it all. So, hey, we talk about Paul George. We got to talk about a member of the actual roster. He's technically a free agent now, but an actual guy on the roster. We'll talk about him too. We'll get into that a little bit on the other side. We got to get your thoughts. We didn't talk about Donovan Mitchell with Derek. We got to get his thoughts on the Donovan Mitchell piece that we did last week
Nuggets,
in your
Wolves,
absence.
And all kinds of
We got to catch up.
My thought is they'll get outbid.
Fair enough.
And honestly, he's going to have a list. And I don't think the Sixers would be on the list anyway, so it doesn't even really matter.
That I actually disagree with. We'll get into that if you'd like to.
All right.
You know who's on my list? Who's on
your
our
list?
Our good friends at Olipop, guys. Olipop, as I tell you all the time, a new kind of soda with only 2 to 5 grams of sugar per can, plus 9 grams of fiber. Olipop is available online in almost 30,000 retailers nationwide, including the most recent launch at all Wawa stores, where you can scoop a classic root beer or a strawberry vanilla at the Wawa closest to you. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a nice, crisp, refreshing watermelon lime. I highly recommend it. It seems like it'd be a good mixer for some fun adult beverages in the summertime. You're sitting out on your back porch. You're at the beach. You're somewhere warm. You're coming inside from doing some hard work outside. Olipop gives you what you want from soda, that nice sweet taste, that complement to some things that you're eating, something to come into in the hot weather. But you don't have to worry so much about your health because Olipop is much lower in sugar than conventional sodas, with only 2 to 5 grams of sugar from natural sources, no added sugar, and they have plenty of classic flavors, guys. In addition to this beautiful watermelon lime that we have here, we've got vintage cola, classic root beer, orange squeeze, classic grape, strawberry vanilla, cream soda, and cherry cola. You can use the code PHLY20 for 20% off of your next Olipop order. The discount only applies to one-time orders, not to subscription orders. Olipop is sold online at drinkolipop.com and on Amazon, and it's available in almost 30,000 retailers nationwide, including Wawa, Target, Sprouts, Wegmans, ShopRite, and Go Puff.
So you know how I destroy Shawn Wayans as the weakest link of the Wayans family?
Boy. Yeah.
But it was one funny thing he did on the Wayans brothers show, where John Witherspoon is their father, plays their father on the show, the late, great John Witherspoon. And I was doing the pop, 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 all that stuff while you doing it. So John Witherspoon starts dancing and Shawn Wayans is like pop, 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 soda, pop, pop, pop.
I was like, where are you going with this, Devon? How is this connected to...
It's really funny. You got to see it. But that's the only funny thing that Shawn Wayans did. And it was at the expense, of course, of the late, great John Witherspoon.
Nothing funny about...
Got to coordinate.
Nothing funny about Olipop.
No.
It's delicious.
But it's perfect for the ad read.
There you go.
There you go.
Listen, guys, I have another beverage friend that I want to tell you about. You've heard about it. You've heard me use the words choose chill on this show. Anyone who watched the show yesterday caught my rant about Denver fans. You know that I certainly am not always capable or willing to choose chill. But when you decide to be better than I am, when you decide to rise above it all and choose a better way, choose the chiller way, you can do so and reach for an ice cold Coors Light. Because with Coors Light, you know you're getting an ice cold beer when the mountains turn blue on the bottles and cans, when they hit that perfect temperature. Guys, I know Memorial Day weekend coming up. Some people are going to have off on Monday, outside grilling. Sometimes, you have a family get-together, family barbecue, whatever it might be. You run into some issues and some arguments with your family, right? Mm-hmm. Whether you're talking about sports, maybe you get into something as thorny as politics. Wouldn't recommend it in a family gathering. But there will be some back and forth. So whether you're arguing about candidates, whether you're arguing about who is the GOAT basketball player, sometimes when that steam starts coming out of your ears and you get mad, I know you can and should choose chill. Do so with Coors Light, which is cold layered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smooth finish. It is mountain cold refreshment. So even if those awful Denver fans come to your barbecue and ruin it on Memorial Day, you can choose to rise above it all and choose chill by choosing Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company in Golden, Colorado.
Yes. Olipop.
Do you guys get
And we
into
don't
it?
stop. Phi Chi. That's what he says.
There we
Olipop
go.
and we don't stop.
Do you guys get into it in politics at family events, or is everyone quiet about that?
Not really. No. Debates, but more so stay on the same side kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but conversations, debates.
We have one wing of our family that's on the opposite side of everybody else.
The splinter cell.
We just try to not talk to them about it. Yep.
You know not to touch that.
Listen,
subject.
nobody wants to be sitting there eating their Thanksgiving turkey or their Memorial Day hot dog and burgers and
Yep.
debate economic policy. It's like,
I wish
just yell at me about LeBron and Michael Jordan.
I wish it was economic policy that got brought up. Trust me.
Tables flipping.
Speaking
on-
of economic
on
policy, how about DeAnthony
Thanksgiving.
Melton's next contract?
Yes. Keith Pompey, Inquirer.com, had a piece out there, and he was discussing how, while we've talked about DeAnthony Melton because of the back injury, not because of his performance on the floor of what he could get on the open market, but more, Derek, because of the back injury and how that may benefit the Sixers in a way where we looked at him possibly coming back on a one-year deal, low money because he didn't, we don't know, surgery on his back or recovery because of his back.
Yeah.
Maybe he wanted to stay here because he had the injury while he was here and dealing with it and getting it all done here. Whatever it is, the Sixers might benefit from him dealing with the back injury. But seeing a report like this out there where he could potentially get maybe the 4 years, or let's just say more than the 1 year, but as it was said, 4 years, maybe as high as $60 million. What do you think of that, man? $15 million annually for DeAnthony Melton with a bad back.
No, 4 years, $60 million is complete lunacy, suggesting that there's no
Looney
chance.
Tunes.
There's absolutely zero chance. I do wonder if one team, and it doesn't even, you try to think of what team and what situation would even contemplate doing that risk. There is none. That is at the, I'm trying to think, what would a mid-level starting at $12 million with 8 or 5% raise? I don't know exactly what that would be. Would that come out to 460? It would be close to 460. I can't even see a good team getting a mid-level to him because you're just not going to commit that many years to somebody who has that many injury concerns and that much uncertainty. It's one thing to have an injury. It's another thing to have so much uncertainty. We haven't seen this guy play consistent, regular basketball in a year and a half.
Yeah.
You can't commit that many resources. One thing I don't think we've necessarily talked about enough during the summer is that the middle class of the NBA has a chance to really get squeezed under this next collective bargaining agreement because those kind of, when you're talking about double aprons, those kind of contracts, big but not on impact players, become very, very risky. And to sign a guy who legitimately can't stay on the court because of the injury, and the injury has impacted his effectiveness 2 years in a row, you just can't do it. Might there be a team maybe that wants to give him a 1 year with maybe a partial guarantee on a second year that's more money than it would make sense for the Sixers? Absolutely, that could happen. Because for the Sixers, anything above the minimum, I don't think you can commit to, not because DeAnthony's not worth it, not even because the risk isn't worth it, but because of how that would then inhibit you on using the next, the remainder of your cap space. Like we've said a lot of times here over the last couple of weeks or months, I honestly don't know. The time is sort of blending together. But the Sixers, they have 3 players essentially under contract in Embiid, Maxey's cap hold, and Ricky Council. Then you have a max slot available, a $15-ish million slot available, and then the room mid-level exception. That's really what you have to work with if you are going the max player route before you get to minimum contracts. So if you use, let's say, $5 million or $8 million on a 1-year deal to DeAnthony Melton, it's not that DeAnthony isn't worth that. It's then he takes that $15 million cap space, cuts it in half.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do that, you have to be able to bank on DeAnthony being a contributor. And there's just no way that you can bank on DeAnthony being a contributor considering his injury status. So I just don't know, it's one thing to say DeAnthony as a player, maybe before the injury, could have been worth upwards of 4 years, $60 million. I could see that. It's another thing to make that statement, knowing what we now know, knowing the reality of the collective bargaining agreement, and asking yourself which teams would even contemplate taking that risk. I can't see it. I just can't see it.
So I'll lay out one scenario that I brought up to you guys before the show that maybe De'Anthony can get 2 years, but more than likely 1 year at a balloon type number.
And that's what I said. Like, there could be a contract out there, 1 year, maybe even a partial guarantee on the second. That doesn't make sense for the Sixers. That would make sense for someone else. It just wouldn't be anywhere approaching that report.
Yeah. So here's the scenario. Paul George goes back to LA. The Sixers are then, let's say they're in for Jimmy Butler. Like that becomes priority number one. They know they're not getting Paul George. They're pushing chips in for Jimmy Butler. Klay Thompson returns to Golden State on a lesser number than he wants, but doesn't have a huge market. The Orlando Magic, who everyone knows, they want shooting, they want guard help, they want to complement the big forwards, big wings that are their core guys currently. They get Malik Monk at, let's say, $20 to $25 million, still have a bunch of cap space left over. I could see them, a guard-starved team that still has their core wing/forwards at cheap prices for the next few years. They could say, hey, we'll give De'Anthony 1 year, 15. We might even go 2 for 30 and just say, we're going to roll the dice. It doesn't really matter. Like, we have the flexibility, the timeline that we can operate on to do such a thing. And even then, that team is not giving him 4 years. They might give him 4 years if you're going to do like a Hinkie special contract, right? Where it's
like a rookie council contract.
Right. Like a very low number, and you have non-guaranteed years, as you're talking about, Derek. And maybe in that scenario,
makes no sense for him. You're not locking yourself.
It does not. So De'Anthony, I could see De'Anthony taking, if they give 1 for 15, certainly, yeah. Like, that's for a prove-it year for a guy who has not been healthy for a year and a half. You go somewhere where you're needed, where you're a good fit, where you have a chance to play a lot of minutes, where you have a chance to prove yourself and get that next deal, maybe that 4 for 60 type deal. But $15 million a year is what somebody like, I keep bringing him up on the show. It's what Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has been making the last couple of years. Guy who's been super durable, who's played for Denver in big moments in the playoffs, has been one of their most reliable role players. He's going to get that step up, I think, this offseason, maybe to like $20 to $25 million a year. But De'Anthony Melton cannot, if he gets 4 for 60 this offseason, I will not eat a shoe, but I will give a fucking standing ovation to his agent if he's able to get 4 for 60. And look, you guys know who watch this show, the people in our Discord, you guys certainly at the desk here with me, that I like De'Anthony. I think he's a valuable role player.
Mm-hmm.
If
Great
and
guy,
when he's healthy, good locker room presence, all that. Under no circumstances can the Sixers pay him real money this offseason. It doesn't matter if it's 1 year, doesn't matter if it's 4 years. They can't do it, and I would be shocked if he gets any kind of long-term commitment beyond basically a fake contract from another team.
Yeah,
and I feel bad for him because it's been mostly out of his control. Right, when he's played, he's been part of super productive lineups. He obviously had the bad playoffs last season, or bad end of the playoffs, we should say.
Game 6, man.
Last season, that Game 6 performance. But I just don't see it. I don't know where it comes from.
Even going back to your Orlando hypothetical, I just can't imagine there won't be a better, higher value target they can go after in a trade to use the remainder of that cap space.
Or like, what if KCP, they could just say, hey, we're going after him too. We signed Malik Monk and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and that fills out our rotation.
I just don't see any scenario where this is realistic. And look, I know that there was a qualification on that report that was back depending. How are you going to prove your back is healthy over the summer when
it's literally the trickiest injury
when
to
you
try
spent
to
an entire summer trying to rest it to prove that it was healthy, and it didn't work. So I just don't know how you could prove that.
And so JS in the chat said, let Melton walk. Well, no, you don't let him walk if you can get him for the price that the guys are talking about for him to come back on a cheaper deal, because the player, you like the player, it's the back. And that's what it is, the back. And if the money goes into that direction of that 4 potentially for 60, and that was more Bleacher Report than it was anything. It wasn't just, the Keith part of it from Inquiry. We're just putting it back out there from Bleacher Report as the report really came from. So it's not crazy talk to want to bring De'Anthony Melton back on that 1 year deal where you can get a good player at an okay price that fits underneath your salary cap, and the type of player he is when he is on the floor, you don't have to let him walk if you can keep him at a decent number there. There's a lot of names being thrown out like Gary Harris and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, where, to your guys' point, you can fit that stuff in there for that $15 million. So, and when you lay it out like that, Derek, of you have that max slot, you have that $15 million, and you have the exception that you have, if it's not a big-time difference maker that you feel like is worth that $15 million, then you absolutely have to try to split that up because of the depth that you want on your roster, and you only have 4 players currently technically on the roster right now.
The absolute most the Sixers can give him is a part of the room mid-level. Maybe you split that room mid-level into 2 players.
Like 4 or 5.
He gets support. But even that, I would just rather go out there and pursue it. But the problem with an $8 million player is it's not enough to get like someone who's anywhere approaching starting level, like you're talking about a bench reserve. So maybe you think, give me 2 rolls of the dice at a bench player at a little more than the minimum rather than 1. But even there, I think I'd probably just rather prefer the $8 million swing.
Yeah, the place I keep coming back to, I'm 100% in agreement with you, Derek. You cannot go into next season relying on him as an important part of the rotation. If you can treat him as something like a lottery ticket and say, look, we bring you back on a very affordable deal. You've played in high leverage spots in the playoffs for us. You've been a starter. We know that you can come off the bench and be an impact guy. He was for the Sixers. He was for Memphis. That's been his part he's played for quite a long time now. There's certainly appeal to having him in general. To me, there's zero appeal if you have to pay real money to him. Because the thing with this team, and it is a part of the effect of building around Joel Embiid, you just can't, you can only have so many guys who are going into the season health risks, right? You need stability around him and without him, because you know basically every season he will miss time and you need to have a level of stability. That was, as much as Joel's injury killed them, that 2-month stretch, the other thing is they couldn't put a consistent lineup on the floor every single night. It was guys are in and out and in and out and in and out and in and out, and you can't afford that. They need to have, this is our team, this is our identity. Someone will get hurt. Multiple guys will carry injuries throughout the year. But if you're going to bet on someone, it just can't be a guy who for half the season they just didn't know what they could get from him, right? It was, they tried to bring him back. He played 2 games, and now he's out another month. They tried to come back, out another month. You can't have guys like that be one of your 5 to 6 most important people on the team. It just can't happen.
I'm truthfully stunned that a report like this came out. I
agree.
did not expect.
I thought everybody was in agreement that this is like, the guy's back has been fucked up for like 2 years at this point.
I mean, hell, let's just go out and give Robert Covington the rest of that salary.
Right, like
what are we doing?
Put him on a milk carton. He was gone for half the season. Yeah, we're going to give him 2 for 30, whatever it is. Yeah.
Well, we'll see what DeAnthony Melton gets. We'll see if he's back, if he's moving on to another team, wherever he's going. You know, he has to go where he needs to go to get the money, because, you know, he's going to, coming into the season, he thought he was probably going to have a full season. He hoped to have a full season and boost his value and get something big on the open market. Well, it's because he needs money, you know, to spread around, some gifts and all that stuff. Well, for you, fellas, blink if you haven't purchased your Father's Day gift yet. Or, ladies, if you haven't purchased the Father's Day gift yet for your loved one, wherever it might be, and you're looking for that Father's Day gift, come on. You know good and well you haven't bought your Father's Day gift yet, because you always wait for the day before, because it's Father's Day. It's not Mother's Day. So let's be honest.
You don't have to get dad flowers.
Today's episode is brought to you by Manscaped, the leaders in below-the-waist grooming. But maybe your pops has had a big facial hair thing going on for years, since the 70s, and that's okay. That's his thing. That's what he's known for.
One day when I was like 3, my dad shaved for the first time in my life that I could remember, and I had like a panic. I thought his face was broken.
Oh, dude, the first time I saw my dad without a mustache was like the most shocking day of my life.
I see so many videos of this happening where their appearance changes. And of course, the loved ones don't know who they are, and the kids are scared.
So scare your kids by buying Manscaped.
And that's okay. Our friends at Manscaped have crafted the total package for his special day, whether it's for the boys downstairs, his beard, or even the best pair of underwear out there. Manscaped has his bases covered. Head over to manscaped.com and get 20% off plus free shipping with code PHLY. Love this one, Kyle. From daddy to zaddy.
Oh, yeah.
Trust Manscaped. You know that beard trimmer that your dad's been using since you were in grade school? Yes. It's probably needing an upgrade. Introducing the Beard Hedger Pro Kit, the complete beard maintenance kit for all the bearded kings out there. This all-in-one kit comes with the Beard Hedger, Manscaped's most advanced beard trimmer, as well as shampoo, conditioner, oil, and balm for its beard. It's also coming with a brush, a comb, and scissors, so dad, granddad can style his beard and mustache like the true gentleman that he is. So if you want to do that for your loved one and get that taken care of, again, go to Manscaped to have that covered. And the boxers that we mentioned, the Boxers 2.0, they were designed with the simple mission to make the most comfortable boxers a man could buy. It starts with the jewel pouch, a dedicated space that cradles your stones, in place with a perforated performance fabric for extra breathability. All right, you need to be able to breathe. So get 20% off plus free shipping with code PHLY at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use code PHLY. Never forget where you came from. If you know what I mean, happy Father's Day from Manscaped.
We also want to make sure we tell you about Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. You know, if you're a closet Celtics fan or whatever. But there's also, of course, Phillies tickets. You want to go see those.
Some of those.
Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer deals on last-minute tickets, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. One of the great benefits of Game Time is you can buy tickets at the very last second, and you can save up to 60% off by buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And with flash deals, you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And of course, with Game Time, you know what you get before you buy with a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And with the Game Time guarantee, it means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code PHLY for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right, let's check out some of the super chats that we do have. We have some super chats rolling in here. Beginning with, let me see, the first one that I have. Liam Stevens says, which player is most Gordon-esque, as we talked about last week? Caruso, Lowry.
Is this like a reflection on his skin tone? Like, what?
Player style.
No,
I was thinking the other Gordon. Yeah. Because
which Gordon are you thinking of?
Gordon Hayward, honestly, is what I thought.
No, I think it was
Aaron Gordon.
Caruso doesn't play anything like him.
No.
But
I mean, neither
the
of them.
connectivity,
I think Caruso is the most like Aaron Gordon, for sure.
Like dirty work.
Yeah,
all
like
that
you
kinda.
trust him to get that done, yeah.
Now, Markkanen fits more of has been a number one out. Now,
Well,
also
I
has
think that's part
been
of
a
what threw me off,
secondary.
too. Like, Lowry doesn't play like Aaron Gordon at all.
No. Markkanen has been a guy who has been both a secondary and a primary option now. And if you're trying to make a case for, okay, this guy could come here and go back to being in a different sort of role behind the best player, behind Tyrese Maxey.
We did bring him up in that show, didn't we?
Markkanen?
Did we bring up Markkanen?
Very briefly, yeah. I mean, look, if there's ever a legitimate rumor about Markkanen, we will be all over it. Because I think I was the one who floated his name in like November or whatever. Like, oh, he'd be great. But there's just been...
No, everyone knows, but every rumor is like, no.
He's going to cost 8 million picks, and even then, I don't know.
So
that
Liam says it doesn't have to be those two. But that was our show last week, Liam, where we talked about that type of player.
We did an entire show on this.
Yeah, so check it out last week. We discussed it, and Aaron Gordon was the photo for the thumbnail of that type of player.
No, I was trying
So building off of what he said, we did not get into Caruso on that show. His name comes up, and we don't dive deep into Caruso that often. he would be the perfect role player. Like to me, he's the perfect role player on
Chicago
almost
just has to
any
come to their
team.
senses, and nobody expects
But
that
they
to
said
happen.
they're still in win mode now, the report said
Win
last
what?
week.
Win 35
I don't
games?
know. I don't know.
No,
Wasn't me.
yes. The answer is yes. All Chicago wants to do is get to at least one playoff series, get the ticket receipts for being a playoff team. I said it on the show. They were a play-in loss away from having the number 1 overall pick. And if they don't come to their senses after that, like how thin the margins are between being a worthless team that like nobody really cares about and a team that, hey, maybe you have some future upside, maybe you can build something. I don't know when they're ever going to wake up and figure that out.
They're in win now mode. They said, the report said also they were still looking to bring back DeMar DeRozan as well. You're starting to get these highlights now of Lonzo Ball back on the floor doing basketball activities. So to your point, maybe they are still thinking that way, and that's where they are going to stick.
I think for them to come back to reality, one of two things has to happen. Either they change their management, which I don't think is going to happen now. It would have already happened if it were.
Mm-hmm.
Or DeRozan goes elsewhere, and they have to face a rebuild, look it right in the eye.
Yep.
Until that happens, they're going to try to keep their job, which means winning 35 to 38 games, making the play-in, maybe something unexpected happens, and they can sell playoff tickets.
Is DeRozan still off your list? Not type of player like Aaron Gordon, but is he off your list as a
He
back
might be
end?
like plan H, maybe, but yeah, he's pretty far down.
We're gonna have
the
to do a
list.
show that's like ranking all the plans
A through Z.
A to Z, right through the alphabet. So on the Caruso front, though, he is the Gordon-esque player in the sense that he will come here and do every single thing that is like hey, nobody else wants to do it. I will. I'm going to attack that guy at the point of attack.
He does miss a lot of games.
He does. Well, because part of it's he just plays through out of his shoes, and so plays a physical brand of basketball. Actually had a really good shooting season last year. Do you guys, if you had to guess, blind guess, what did he shoot from three last year on almost 5 attempts per game?
I think it was right around 40, wasn't it?
38.
40.8%.
Okay.
So almost 41% from three. Now,
He doesn't brick threes, Money Mar.
He just doesn't take
I
enough
would
of
not
them.
expect that. Well, I mean, took almost
No,
5 a game.
He
so
took
that
a
was
lot more last year.
That's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
best volume he's ever had in his career and the best best efficiency in like a real season. He shot 48% in 25 games 4 or 5 years ago, which I don't really care about that. But to Derek's point that he loves to make on the show about part of the way you solve the rebounding issue is to have guys who don't get beat so easily on the perimeter. And so that way Joel Embiid is not chasing people around and playing that cat and mouse game in pick and rolls and having to play the middle ground there and then also go rebound the ball. It's allowing your big to play like a big around the rim as a rebounder, or your starting power forward as well, making sure those guys are around the rim. Alex Caruso helps you do that. Alex Caruso is happy being in that complementary secondary role. He's a good transition player. He's a good cutter, understands spacing. He's an excellent player, and for all those reasons, he's a high-cost guy in terms of the trade market. I'm fairly confident, I would say. The Sixers made attempts to get him, or at least made phone calls to try to get Alex Caruso last season, and they were told, just like everybody else, we are not open for business. It doesn't matter how comical your offer is. Alex Caruso is not moving. And so I keep bringing him up as like hey, you sign Paul George and you have this draft capital to move. I would move some real assets to get Caruso in that scenario. It still rests on the idea that the Bulls will, I don't want to say come to their senses because he is a good player. Like you don't give him away for cheap, but come to their senses in the respect of cash in while you can.
They have him
before
for one more year, and you're
Yeah.
going to be a shit team. What are you doing? It's really weird. Anyway, I do think there are a lot of pathways where like Caruso as a target makes a lot more sense in the summer than he did at the trade deadline next year because you have that certainty of what the other big move is. It's part of the reason why the Caruso or Markkanen question was a little bit odd is because one of them's a primary target, one of them's a secondary. But if your primary target that you end up getting might be a Paul George, might be a Brandon Ingram, then I think Caruso as a secondary target in those two instances makes a lot of sense. And maybe now that you know that you have Ingram or Paul George, you're willing to overpay more than you would have been willing to overpay at the trade deadline. But Chicago has to face reality, and you have to lock in that first target first.
Let's get to the next super chat here from our guy Haidar. Haidar checking in with the super chat. Regarding the Paul George, Kawhi contracts, do these players or any players care about the salary hierarchy in general?
Oh,
yes.
I'm wondering
Sure,
if
yes.
ego could be an
Especially
issue.
if you throw in any players, yes, there are players that care about salary hierarchy for sure. Do those two? I don't know for sure. Some of the murmuring has been that they do.
I can't speak specifically to Paul George and Kawhi. To Derek's point, I think that has been broadly the sentiment here, that when you set the Kawhi top of your market, part of the reason you don't go past that is because there would be people, maybe Kawhi, who would be upset if you go over the top of the deal that was, I don't want to say promised, but was at least like suggested to him that, you're the guy, you're the alpha. It's something that we get into on this show in a lot in different capacities, that so much of what you see on the floor in terms of rotations and minutes and all that is politics. Not all politics, but at least some politics. Like the Tobias Harris situation, for example. Part of the reason you continue to play him lots and lots of minutes, even as he's outperformed by other players, is because of the money that's being made. Part of the reason that some guys get more touches is not necessarily because they are better than player Y, teammate Y alongside of them. It's because when they sign that contract, part of the contract negotiation, or at least the understanding the teams come to with the player, is that as this guy making this much money, you're going to have X percent of the opportunities here. So how much that goes into the day-to-day stuff, I can't sit here and give you like an exact percentage, but absolutely the contract hierarchy and what guys are making matters. It matters in every sport. The same way, like, look, in your workplace, right? If you find out, if you were given a spreadsheet of here's what every person, every coworker that I have, every peer that I have makes compared to what I make. If one of your coworkers sucks ass and you can't stand them, and you find out, hey, that guy's making 25% more than I am, or maybe they don't suck, but you feel you have more responsibility than they do, and they're still making a lot more money than you do, you're going to be upset about it. So it's the same. Their salaries are all public. They all know what each other make, and so that makes for interesting dynamics in the locker room. Some guys handle it better than others, but absolutely it can be a factor.
Especially in the NFL. You see it, this quarterback signs. All right, cool. Next week, that quarterback who's also up for a deal, I need that and I need more. Even if it's...
Keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah, you hear it all the time. Even if it's $1 more or whatever number it has to be more than what the other guy got. Somebody did ask, I thought it was interesting because we never talk about the guy. Interesting player. Aquil McKnight says, any interest in Najee Marshall? So Najee Marshall is on a very, very cheap deal. It's a club option, close to $2 million. He's an unrestricted free agent next summer. Najee Marshall is a nice player. We never talked about him like that because he was never in that tier of player that we talked about, of the Aaron Gordon type of having been a star before, taking a dip in your role a bit to make things work for your team. He's more of a guy that you look at, can he get better? Does he have more there to add to your team where he's going to be a better player with maybe more minutes, more opportunity that he might have on a different club? Najee Marshall is a nice player, but he doesn't fit with what in that tier of what we were talking about as far as Lowry, Markkanen, and Aaron Gordon.
So here's what I would say. My impression, based on, maybe this is just on the media side, and maybe it ends up that Najee Marshall is a guy who flies under the radar. I've seen a lot of he's so under the radar that now he's on the radar and above the radar. I think I've seen a lot of discussion about him, like had a good shooting season, so that was a big development for him, although low volume, so how much do you trust it? That's an important factor for the Sixers. I don't watch the Pelicans enough to say this with confidence, but from people that I talk to and trust, saw some playmaking development from him, that he was like he's averaging like 2 assists a game, basically.
Yep.
But that just in terms of the reads and the type of passes you need to make in a Joel and Tyrese centric system, that he's good there. I think he's a pretty good defensive player, at least a guy with the type of size and athleticism you want as a wing, forward, whatever you want to characterize him as, to slot into one of those 2 through 4 spots alongside those guys. So I certainly have interest in him.
I like the player.
I don't know where he's going to settle dollar amount, and that kind of
especially
is
if
the
they
biggest
move,
factor.
if they potentially move Ingram and you sign Trey Murphy, they're going to want somebody to be there in their system, maybe that is already familiar with what they do, and that's where he gets that elevated role.
Couple quick points of clarification. The club option it was for this past season.
This past
he is
season.
an unrestricted free agent coming into this summer.
Okay, my apologies.
The reason he is unrestricted is because he has 4-year experience. A lot of people looked at, I think it's coming off a rookie scale contract. He was undrafted in 2020 because of that. Restricted free agency basically happens in 2 instances. If a player has 3 or fewer years of experience, he has 4, that's more. Or if they're coming off of a first-round rookie scale contract, he is not because he went undrafted. So he is an unrestricted free agent. Obviously, they would have his bird rights, though, so they could offer him more. Not that you expect that to matter, but they can go over the cap to re-sign him as well.
I appreciate that. But
And
I
by
like
the way,
the player, though. Yeah.
I'm just filling the Berman role here.
Because of what
Needed.
because of what
I will say, I was listening to the show while driving. I wanted to get a Zach chant going in my car. But
we had a few commenters at the start of the show. I asked for it, and we got some Zach. Because of what you're talking about, Derek, the manner in which he came into the league, I think he's probably, I can't speak for him. I don't know Najee Marshall. He could just be like, I care about right situation, ability to win, all that. My estimation is he's going whoever's giving him the biggest contract this summer. And I would doubt that'll be the Sixers, although certainly they're one of the teams that has more of a need for wing players than the other team. Like, for example, if you're comparing them to like San Antonio, they're another big cap space team. San Antonio needs guards. They need guard play rather than, and so I don't know that they're going to pony up a lot. Orlando doesn't really need him, or doesn't need, they don't want to spend a ton of money on wings and forwards because their core foundation guys are wings and forwards, and they got to prioritize guards. So maybe the Sixers can somehow slide in there. I don't know. Do you guys think he could be gettable for the room exception, for example? I feel like he might get more than that.
Given the progress he made, especially on that shot, if anyone, because he shot really poorly the first 3 years, if anyone believes that the last year was legitimate, I could see him getting more than that, just based on rate of improvement.
Would you have interest, is the question.
At the room, yeah, I'd have interest.
At the room? Yeah. Because it's a dice roll to a degree. Even if he doesn't shoot, though, I think he has enough ancillary skills and certainly defensive value that I'd
have to go back and watch like every jumper he took and before I firmly commit, but it's a tepid,
Nice player. I like the player. Derek, since you weren't here, since you said you wanted to have this Zach chant while you were driving, you were in the chat on the Donovan Mitchell conversation. Just to bring it back to last week on that Thursday when you were off, what are your thoughts of how we discussed everything? You saw what the chat was active, a lot of people, the fit, the possibility of maybe going, and everything else that came thereafter with the Darius Garland rumors of potentially wanting to separate the two if Mitchell does stay in Cleveland. Your thoughts on Donovan Mitchell as a potential target for the Sixers?
So I have two sort of beliefs, and this runs up against each other on this one. I think Mitchell would, if he's available, he's far and away the most talented player in the right time of his career that you can get. And because of that, I tend to, if you can get talent like that, get it and worry about the fit a little bit later. I worry about the fit a lot, but when the talent is that high, you try to figure it out. I also really do not like two short guards. I just, as a team building, I don't like
We mentioned you for that reason. Yes.
Phil, I know you were in the chat earlier. He likes to misrepresent, saying that I don't want to take Maxey off ball. No, that's not my concern. I don't want to bring in somebody who has to be on ball. That's a key distinction. I would love to have as many playmakers and shot creators as you can get. I love the fact that Maxey can go between on and off ball and excel in both roles.
It's part of his value.
Part of his value. I don't have very much concern about Mitchell and Maxey fitting offensively. The question is, if you have to put all of your resources into one acquisition, is that combination going to have enough defensive versatility to get all the way all the way. There's so many teams that are so good at bozo hunting. We will see that a lot, and that sort of like leads us into our series preview. So many teams that are so good at it. I worry about that defensive pairing in the backcourt in the playoffs for sure. For sure. That being said, like, he's real. I think one thing, he was good when he came in the league, but I think overrated. He's made huge strides over the last couple of years.
Considerably better player.
I like him so much more than I liked him 4 years ago. And I do think this is, as like, if you're talking pure talent, this is as much as you can get. Yeah, you can talk me into Donovan Mitchell if it's realistic.
If he was truly available, where does he maybe leap over some of the other guys that we always talk about? George, Butler, Ingram,
I think he's
Mitchell.
number one.
Okay.
And we're assuming in that instance he's coming and immediately signing an extension.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
What would that extension?
I think it's $200 million.
Yeah, so it's the maxi extension.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that leaves you a little more flexibility than some of these other higher priced 35% max guys do too.
And by the way, unlike in the cases of if you trade for Jimmy Butler, if you sign Paul George, even if for whatever reason the whole thing crumbles, those are tradable maxes.
Yes,
you will get value for,
and that is part of it too.
30-year-old
Yep.
Donovan Mitchell making $50 million a year, whatever it is. That guy can move. You can turn that if you need to, or if he gets disgruntled, if whatever happens that you want to move him, that is a movable max contract. You are not painted into a corner on that.
Yes, and look, like I said, I don't like two short guards as a team building archetype. That's not my preferred style of going. But Kyle's point there, I think that last one was a big one. He will be on a positive value contract for the duration of that deal.
Yes.
So even if the two guards don't work out, and we've seen a lot of pairings of two guards that don't work out, even if that doesn't work out, you can then trade that for positive value.
And also, and if it turns out you just want to keep Mitchell and you got to move Maxey,
Right.
not saying, again, don't misconstrue this.
Yeah.
I'm not advocating for trading Tyrese, but 3 years down the road, it's like, something's a push got to come to shove here. One of them can be moved for great surplus value.
If you get Donovan Mitchell at that contract, it's only because he says, I want to go play with Joel Embiid. And you sort of take that bit of good luck and you run with it. And because you can get, you have a little more flexibility under that second apron by having two players at the lower max level. I'm not going to say it wouldn't concern me. Like I said, it's not the archetype that I prefer. I think defense would be a real concern, but he would be high on my list.
Well, off of that, Michael checks in, as he did last week when the conversation says, except Devon seemed to like suggesting that we can just outgun everyone. Devon, come on, man. So I'll leave that for you.
Most teams that try to outgun people don't have Joel Embiid.
And by the way, I know that they got to play two injured teams. What the Pacers are in the conference finals.
With
Their
the
entire
24th ranked
identity
defense,
is outgunning everybody. And I'll give Indiana credit for this because we can put whatever asterisk you want on, hey, Giannis is hurt, Dame was hurt, the Knicks crumbled, we all saw it. All that is true. But Indiana did not play much, if any, different in the playoffs than they did in the regular season. And the whole pushback on their identity as a team was, well, this isn't playoff basketball, right? Like, this is borderline science experiment type of way to play. Like, they're just running and running and running. In Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals,
67%.
those guys were pulling a make from the Knicks out of the basket and out. They are going. They're scoring in 3 seconds. They're just beating the Knicks down the floor. So, they committed to that identity. There's no one way.
I almost had a tear in my eye. These guys defending me like this, man. I don't know.
There is no one way to win in the NBA is, to me, what the lesson should be from not just this year, but recent seasons, right? Like, everyone wants to... Building the best mousetrap does not mean building the same mousetrap as the team that is currently in the conference finals or the finals. It's one team loads up in the front court and has Rudy Gobert and Karl Towns and their number one overall pick, Anthony Edwards, leaps to stardom, and that's how you win. Nikola Jokic, much different player, guy with a bunch of shooters and cutters around him. Joel Embiid is much different from those. Every team demands selling out to find your best identity. And that, to me, is the lesson of both the Timberwolves and the Pacers that I think people should take to heart. Like, don't don't chase what Minnesota has. Don't chase what Indiana has. But you can win with different ways, different styles. It's just a matter of mastering the style that you commit to. And that, I think, was sort of, in a roundabout way, Joel Embiid's message at the end of the season when he said, like, we need continuity. We need people who are here and to build that the chemistry, the camaraderie, the understanding over, frankly, years of time. They won't have that coming into this year, but that should be the top priority for this group.
And part of that, like you know, it's a little prisoner of the moment where, you know, don't just emulate the teams that currently won. Then you see a lot of people like, oh well, youth is the only thing that wins. Look at the Nuggets. Even Murray and Jokic look tired. Well, Murray and Jokic look tired because they had no depth. Yeah. And a lot of people like to bring up, you know, Lively and the Mavs and don't trade the pick because of Lively. Well, you know, Denver was kind of relying on Peyton Watson. And he ended up getting beat out of the rotation by Justin Holiday on a minimum contract. Like, I think a lot of people will look at these. It's sort of weird. When you talk about signing players in free agency, I think people overly focus on the failures because you're investing so much in them that the failures become prominent. When you talk about young, like, draft picks, I think people overstate the likelihood of the success stories because that's what you remember. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of... And look, I think Peyton Watson can end up being a good NBA player. Even Christian... Brown, like, he struggled in that series.
I know you wanted to say
I even had to, like, pause. You spell it wrong. And anyway, we don't need to go over
We had a whole conversation before the show about this.
For every Lively that you find, you're going to find 5 different ones. And, you know, the Nuggets, part of the reason they had depth concerns is they have a top-heavy roster with a lot of high contracts, and they had to get young players in there to supplement them and give them depth. It didn't happen. So, like, you can be prisoner of the moment with the Mavs and Lively, but I think you have to take a step back and realize, like, look at the bigger picture trends. It's not that cut and dry. Really what it comes down to, third star, depth, keep the pick, trade the pick. It comes down to execution. Yes. And do you make the right decisions with the options you have in front of you, more so than a hard and fast rule that I think some people like to paint it as.
And if you get Donovan Mitchell, you want the defense to be there, but you get Donovan Mitchell because he scores at will. That's why you get Donovan Mitchell.
And by the way, you know who's an even better example of what you're talking about there? The Golden State Warriors.
Absolutely.
They had a juggernaut, perennial contender team, and they had a choice in front of them. They had a high draft pick. They had a bunch of draft assets that they could use that once Kevin Durant leaves, it's like, all right, how do we approach the future? And they were able to get the one title after Durant, and that was certainly a credit to them for executing that, getting the best 4 months out of Andrew Wiggins than anybody's ever gotten. But part of the reason that they missed the playoffs and are in just a bad spot is because they tried to straddle the line. They said, you know, we're going to use all these picks. We're going to have what they called the 2 timelines approach. We're going in on James Wiseman, who that was just a terrible bet on a player who was not ready to play meaningful minutes for any team, let alone the Golden State Warriors. Kuminga and Moody have, you know, had their ups and downs. I think people are higher on Kuminga still. But those guys have not been able to establish themselves as, like, true rotation guys, except for Kuminga did this year for the first time. Moody is still an inconsistent guy. And that was a guy who was regarded coming out of college as like he's a plug and play, 3-and-D, will fit into the system, help you on both ends type guy. And it doesn't work out. So, like, there's no one way to do anything. And so much of it just comes down to unknowns with how good is your development system? How many minutes are you able to get this guy without compromising your ability to win now? Like, you are juggling 4 and 5 different priorities at any given time. And so that's why we're able to have these debates about whether it's the big free agent, whether it's should they trade 16 or hold on to it and draft somebody. You can't be overconfident in any one approach to team building. That's how it goes.
All right, this afternoon, the All-NBA teams were announced. The first team goes like this. Rudy Gobert, Victor Wembanyama.
All defense, not all
defense.
NBA.
Sorry, all defense. I have
if
it right
Rudy
here
Gobert
too.
made first team All-NBA, I would have fallen out of my chair.
He is the only player making top 15 salary money that has advanced to the conference finals this
All
year.
NBA defensive first team, Rudy Gobert, Victor Wembanyama is a rookie, Bam Adebayo, Anthony Davis, and Herb Jones. 4 big men. in that first team. Second team, Alex Caruso, Drew Holiday, Jaden McDaniels from the Minnesota Timberwolves, Jalen Suggs, and Derek White from the Boston Celtics. Any issues? Is anybody left off you felt like should have squeezed into that top 10?
I'm just going to say it's a little weird because they removed positions.
4 centers.
You see 4 centers in the first group and 4 point guards / combo guards in the second group. I don't have any real big complaints, especially if you're talking about a regular season award. I think that's right about it. I like seeing Herb Jones get rewarded like that. He's the one that I think could have been overlooked, but he was not. So for the most part, I could make we were talking about it before the show, like maybe bumping Jaden McDaniels up. But I think for the most part, this is okay.
Yeah. I probably would have. I don't know who I'd take out. Maybe Herb Jones, maybe Bam Adebayo, just based on the regular season results. I might have bumped one of them out for McDaniels on the first team. But all 10 of those guys are people that you think of, and they're like, that guy gets after it on defense and makes a gigantic impact on their respective teams. So certainly not going to complain about. I'm very interested in the All NBA.
Yes, that's later
for a lot of reasons. By the way, like we're going to be talking about Tyrese Maxey.
Tyrese Maxey has about 8 million reasons to be interested.
But yeah, that's the one I'm in because good job, I think, broadly on the voters for getting 10 of the best defenders in the league.
Preview tonight, Eastern Conference. Game 1, Pacers taking on the Celtics. Derek, you want to hear for the last couple of games for the Eastern Conference semifinals between the Knicks and the Pacers? How surprised are you that the Pacers advance, and your thoughts on the series in general, Pacers-Celtics?
I mean, look, to own it, like I think I said Knicks in 5 or 6 before the series. Obviously, the OG injury changed that completely. Obviously, then the further injuries, especially Brunson there at the end, although they were on life support before then, but all that complicated it. Yeah, I'm surprised even still. Like for them to come out and look, I think a lot of people will be clowning New York's defense for the first half there. They just made a lot of fucking shots. And that's one thing about the playoffs. It used to be that basketball was the most predictable of the playoffs because a 7-game series, the best team eventually came up with baseball. 7 games was not enough to find the best team. With basketball, historically, it was. Obviously, football is a completely different animal because it is a 1-game playoff. And
hockey, you can just ride a hot goaltender to the Stanley Cup.
But now and I'll leave it at that because quite frankly, I don't know shit about hockey. Nowadays, with the pace of play, with the parity that both the luxury tax penalties, or repeater tax, and now the second apron is creating, and the variance with the shot, baseball has introduced a little bit of anarchy to a sport that used to be very predictable. And with the Pacers coming out like that...
Basketball, you mean? You said baseball.
I'm all over.
It's okay.
Basketball,
okay.
yes. I'm clearly talking about
Vacation
basketball.
Derek is still here.
If we introduced 3-pointers into baseball, that would... Interesting change.
You got to hit it through a giant donut in center field.
But it's just introduced a little bit of anarchy to a sport that used to be pretty predictive. And I think with the Pacers, like they could play that game 50 times. I'm not sure they shoot as well as they did to start that game any other time, but they did last night. You give them a lot of credit for that. And I go back and forth on whether or not I prefer this bit of anarchy and unpredictability because on the one hand, I enjoy the team building aspect of basketball, and that's becoming tougher and tougher and tougher to see through because there is more variability. On the other hand, it's just more entertaining. But look, I thought they were pretty close to dead in the water. They are a team with Halliburton, who I think overcame some mid-series struggles, and it was fun to see him do that and find a way to make an imprint and adjust his game to do so. That being said, Celtics in 5. I feel almost bad pivoting like that, but I just think Boston's a much better team. When we're talking about a team, these are the top 2 offenses in the league. Obviously, the Pacers play at a tremendous pace. Boston's as good of a transition defense as there is in the league. And when you give a team, and I think Boston could end up losing a game, maybe even 2, because they are a team that takes a lot of threes. We just talked about the variability of that. They will have an off night or 2 or possibly even 3 where the fans are ripping their hair out because they're relying on that jumper too much. But I just think they're the significantly better 2-way team. And because of that, I do think they will eventually overcome it.
Here's what I would say. I'm as you were talking about Pacers Knicks, I'm not giving myself any credit for basically sitting on the fence with my prediction for that series. I was like, well, they could win a war of attrition, but also I kind of expect the Knicks to win. With the Celtics, my one point of concern is just the Porzingis factor. Can he? It looks like he will return, But when does he return, and what does he look like when he's out?
So far, they
Boston-
say first 2 games.
Yeah.
So far.
And the thing is, Boston, they win most series and pretty comfortably. They like to fuck around a little bit at home.
They
in the
are a
first 2
big
games.
fuck around team.
They need to take these first 2 games at home so that they can then go, all right, we can rest Porzingis for games 3 and 4. Give him some extra time to come back. If you can just split then on the road, come back 3-1, you're comfortable with having rested him for that extra time. Can they take care of business at home in these first 2? That's maybe the key to a quick series.
And that's the thing. I don't think I trust them, because if you look at, it's not just this year. This is a historic thing, right? Like last year against Atlanta, there were concerns briefly like, oh my God, are the Hawks going to actually beat these guys in round 1? And then they end up losing to a Miami team that was certainly not as good as them on paper in the conference finals. There's always a game, maybe 2 games in a series where they're screwing around too much or their crunch time issues come home to roost, which is weird because you would think as a team that like they thrived on matchup hunting, forcing switches. Jason Tatum can go at this guy. Jaylen Brown can go at this guy. You leverage the size and athleticism advantages. You play 5 out. You spread it out. You open up the driving lanes, the slash and kick, all that. And then they just don't run anything in the final, 6-7 minutes of a game. And teams that are running organized, disciplined offense can just out-execute them in crunch time, which shouldn't really be possible based on the talent base, but ends up happening. So certainly going to pick the Celtics. I think there's a chance it goes like 6 games because of that. But I think, to Derek's point, I just think the talent advantage is pretty significant. I don't, and look, I talked a lot of skepticism about Tyrese Halliburton on the show. Offensively, had some big moments in the final few games of that series. A lot of Knicks fans mad that he's, by the way, I don't know if I said this on the show yesterday. The Knicks fans who got mad that he only talked shit when they were winning, like, who cares?
That's when you're supposed
you want him to talk shit while he's losing? Like,
Right.
Then you're just going to call him an asshole too. Like he's talking shit when he's playing well and the team is winning. I don't know why that's he's like ruining the purity of basketball or something is how it was. So whatever. But he proved to me, certainly to a lot of people, that he's able to come up with some big time offense when it mattered. I had a lot of skepticism watching them in round 1 against Milwaukee when he was dribbling like Bob Cousy against a terrible Milwaukee defense, but good on him. Miles Turner had a terrific end to that series. Pascal Siakam had an awesome Game 7. They got a lot of guys. They trust their depth, which is another thing. Like they feel confident in the TJs and
fantastic.
The Shepherds and these guys. Like, I think people forget Ben Mathurin out for the season, and like that would have been another guy that you could play.
Aaron Nesmith is a nice player to have on your team.
Hey, revenge factor too, by the way, against the Celtics. So I like that the depth, especially against a team who takes their foot off the gas, because Indiana comes at you in waves and is going to play that 9-10 man rotation, that can allow them they can run up a lead to 15 or 20 points while you're like, what the hell just happened? But I think end of the day, I still, all that being said, trust Boston to take care of business.
I like Boston in 6. Should be a fun series. They split the season series. So we'll see what happens. But I do like Boston in 6. Indiana they'll run out of gas. Not that they can't keep up that pace, just more of running out of gas against a much better opponent in the Boston Celtics.
We got another big super chat.
TJ McConnell was fantastic in that series. He changed the series.
Shout out to TJ, man.
And the way that they could not take him off the floor and run the offense without that guy on the floor. It was amazing to watch him. It was fun to see. And he'll have an impact in this series too, just
100%. Because
of how important he is both offensively and defensively. Last one is from our friend Michael, and he just wants to share again. PHLY Sixers Roadshow in Porto, okay? Want to argue with you guys.
Brother, if we could do a show in Portugal, sign me up.
You can call me any name you want. Absolutely.
I would be delighted. I actually, one of our close family friends, he has family in Portugal that we've talked about going over there to visit his family and see Portugal. I've never been. I've been to Spain, I've been to Germany, been to England. Still have not been to France or Italy. One of those could change this summer. Not clear yet, but Portugal is on the list.
You and I combine our travel, we have almost seen the entire Europe.
Well, listen, my wife has been to all 7 continents, so she put us both to shame.
I used to be able to speak Portuguese, but I can't
Really?
anymore. I think you guys were joking when I said my family speaks Portuguese when we were talking Portuguese food. My family speaks Portuguese. That's where the language of Cape Verde is. And as a kid, and even into my late teens, I could still speak it. Once I stopped visiting my family, I just kind of lost it. I can understand it, but I can't speak it anymore. Yeah, I can't do it anymore.
Buddy, I just got back from a drone trip. If you can get me to Lagos and cruise up and down the cliffs, you can, like I said, any obscenity you want, you can throw my way. I will happily do that.
Well, on the way out, Mike, we'll see you soon, man. Make it happen. Vince, fix that. All right.
Going to Porto, baby.
We're going out there now. Let's get ready to say our goodbyes to I can't remember who said it last week, but it was very good. Roll call here for us.
It is roll call. Well, first of all, the first member of roll call has to be Michael Belfatti with the big super chat to end it. Thank you, Michael B, for that.
Yes, Mike.
Generous.
What up, Mike?
Generous, once again, donation to the program. Thank you very much to everybody else who was here with us today. Our guy, Aaron. We got Corey Fader.
What up, Aaron?
Lost Sleep TV. My girl, Winona.
I didn't know Nona played college basketball.
I did not either. So
Yes.
we're going to have to get into that with her as well.
Talk about that.
Rick Morse, we got Eugene G. Ross, we got Barbara Carroll, we got the #1 trash talker in PHLY, Martian Lynch.
What up, Martian?
Liam Stevens, Phi Chi, Brian Knight, our guy, Haidar, over there in
What up,
Iceland.
Haidar?
We got Cannoli,
Holy cannoli.
Public Enemy #1, Money Mar, Kane.
Kane.
We got Jay and Jay of the Jungle.
Big Daddy Kane.
J and J. I don't know if there's a music group name in there somewhere. J and J.
Like corner stores around the way, J&J, stuff like that.
Jonathan Chen, Spencer Cotman. Who else we got in here today?
Cotman Ave?
Guard
Named yourself
Mello.
after Cotman Ave?
Guard Mello in the house.
Can't guard Carmelo.
Alex McElroy. I know my guy Will was in there. I think I said Kane already, but Kane, I'll hit you 2 times.
What up, Fachi?
You better love somebody in here today.
You gotta love somebody to love
Philip
somebody.
Braxmeyer. Hello, sir. Hello, Philip. Love to see you.
Rick Moore said JJ Fad.
JJ Fad. There you go.
Group. Love it, Rick.
We got JS with 2 periods. Because I feel like it pod. All right.
I like it. What up, JS?
Devon Givens, who the hell is that guy? The hypothetical man. I want to give a special shout out to our guy Al, the 2-minute warning.
Yes.
I put out some APBs on him recently.
He reached out.
He's on the mend right now,
Yes,
so I want to
he did.
send
I forgot to
some
tell you
love
guys
for
that.
our guy Al. I know he said he would get caught up
What up, Al?
On the shows this week. So shout out to our guy Al. That'll be the last one for today. We love you, buddy.
Yes.
If you have not already, could you guys hit the subscribe button for me? Hit the bell icon to get notifications each and every time we go live. If you hit the thumbs up button, it will act as a
super sign.
We love you to Al, and it'll guarantee we will be back at 2:30 tomorrow.
And by the way, if you're watching on Twitter, hop on over to YouTube so you can join the comments.
Oh, look at that. Derek remembering that we're on 2 different platforms at the same time.
Look, it's the first show that we've been on Twitter since I've been back. So,
you
gotta
go.
bring
I
it
did
up.
say it in the beginning just to let people know.
Just 2 reminders better than 1, that's all. That's all.
These guys don't pay attention to me. Thank you, Bree. We appreciate it.
We all silly like the mayor.